Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of the Dice Society podcast. In case you're joining me for the first time, my name is Caillou, and I'm the author of thedicesociety.com. This is a show about the upcoming MCDM RPG, where I talk about its development, my playtest experience, and, once the time is right, first and third-party content being made for the finished game. In today's episode, we've got some exciting news items. The dev team is now complete, the power roll is locked in, we learned a bit more about 2 new ancestries, and we got a sneak peek into inciting incidents. I'll go over all of those and a bunch more in the news segment of the podcast. As for our main topics, first I'll talk quite a bit about monster design, which is proving to be a hard nut to crack for the devs. And then you'll get a nice playtest report that Donald Shepis shared on the Discord, which I bet you'll enjoy. As usual, however, everything we're going to talk about is subject to and probably will change. So don't get your hopes up if you like any of the stuff I describe here. Cool? Cool. Let's draw steel and get started. This time, we've got a bunch of little news items to go through. So instead of my regular unstructured rambling, you'll get a nice numbered list so you can keep track of everything. Number 1. In the last episode, I talked about the prototypes for the Shadow, the Fury, the Elementalist, the Conduit, and the Tactician. Now we know what other classes will be playtested for the core rules. Talent, Troubadour, Null, and Censor. If you really want to make a parallel to D&D 5th edition, this means we'll get analogs for rogues, barbarians, wizards, clerics, fighters, mystics, which is a psionic class that appeared in Unearthed Arcana, and then bards, monks, and paladins. Number 2, D10s. Last episode, I mentioned that the 2d10 power roll was official, but now it's official. According to James, due to the manufacturing of the Ajax edition, the 2d10 power roll is now seemingly final. Maybe there's more tweaking to do, but it looks like they're pretty confident in this design, and I'd go as far as to say that it's now unlikely that they'll change it too much. Number 3. The dev team has previously mentioned that they wanted the backer kit backers to get a playtest packet around July, at the same time as the second Patreon playtest packet. Now it seems like the Patreon packet might come before the backer kit packer, which likely will not make its July goal. This delay is due to the time they're devoting to monster design, something I'll talk about later in this very episode. Number 4, the dev team is now complete with 4 people. Joining Matt, James, and Jordy, the previous newest hire, is Wheelie Abiel, a game designer which you might know from such places as, how do you say to this? Arcadia magazine. And who's this guy? Like Matt Colville's YouTube channel. Let's hope we get to meet him in the next Patreon Q&A so I can bring you more news about what he's been up to inside MCDM. Number 5, Matt showed off a couple of ancestries that they're prototyping. The Time Raiders and the Hakan. The former are space pirates with 4 arms and eyes made of shimmering stone. Nothing much, just the dopest thing ever. You can find them in Flea Mortals, by the way, in case you want to know what they look like. The latter is a half-giant ancestry that can see the time of their deaths. I take it back. This is the dopest thing ever. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any public art of them, so we'll have to wait until we know what they look like. Number 6, they're currently testing class-related inciting incidents, and they even gave us some examples of what they might look like in the May Q&A. One, for conduits, is getting captured by cultists and being saved by a member of your faith midway through an unholy ritual. Now, you're partially incorporeal and can move through walls, but you're also vulnerable to corruption damage. They all come with benefits and drawbacks like this, which is pretty freaking cool if you ask me. Number 7. We got a Patreon post about the VTT. Eventually, I plan on making a whole episode talking about the VTT, dubbed the Codex. But for the moment, I'll just list some of the features they plan on implementing. Tactical battle maps, character management, encounter building, document sharing, map creation, a full marketplace, and Lua-based modding to boot. These guys are not messing around. The VTT will likely be distributed as a cross-platform app on Steam, so everybody can get it as easily as possible. And number 8, now a lightning round to finish off. Movement may become its own thing separate from maneuvers. Caster kits will get more evocative names. The Gen Con adventure they will be running will likely take place during the fall of Black Bottom, as seen in the Chain of Acheron. Wealth is currently tied to character level, but titles can increase it. And lastly, the team seems to be aiming for subclasses to give you about half of your character's class features. And that's it for news. Please let me know if you like this format or if you'd rather get less news items with more in-depth explanations. Now, let's move on to what we currently know about monsters. Let's go. So, let's talk a bit about monsters. According to James, until relatively recently, the dev team assumed they could convert the monster design from Flea Mortals, their 5th edition monster book, into the new RPG. Since Flea Mortals was such a huge hit, this was a very reasonable assumption to make, and the public would likely love it. But this is a different game, and the devs realized that it needs its own theory of monster design. They tried a lot of stuff over the last few weeks, and, at least from the outside, it proved a tough nut to crack. Now, mind you, they still want to have the stuff that made Flea Mortals cool. Monsters that are fun to run, that challenge the players, and that help the DM feel like a tactical genius. But in the MCDM RPG, there's no two-hit rule. The director chooses when monsters go on initiative, and so on. So there's got to be some new tech in order for monsters to work just the way they want to. Their first attempt is what the designers called atomized monsters. These were super simple enemies that basically did only one thing, which meant a director could activate a specific monster exactly when they needed to do what the monster was good at. As added bonuses, you could fit a ton of those in the monster book, and organizing them into encounter sheets was trivial. However, there was a problem. Atomized monsters are hard to run tactically if you're not already a tactical genius. In this framework, prepping encounters was harder, figuring out synergies was harder, and choosing what monster to activate was harder. Atomized monsters was not the solution they were looking for. Next, they tried phases. This meant bundling monsters into groups: artillery, control, melee, and support. Then, the director activates these in order. Simple. For example, the first time the director gets a turn, they activate their artillery creatures. On the second turn, they activate their control creatures, and so on and so forth. This also didn't work as expected, and you can probably see why. This felt a bit stifling for the director, which is arguably worse than requiring a lot of thinking. So it was back to the drawing board. To be fair, the way I'm telling this story makes it seem like they were going back to square one on every single iteration of the design. There was good design that they kept from one iteration to the next. I'm just glossing over some of the details, so you're not stuck here listening to my voice for the next few days. Anyway, what's the state of monster design right now? According to James's post on Patreon, they're testing what they're internally calling squinions. Yep, squinions. Squads plus minions. Shut up, it makes perfect sense. Let me explain. Minions now share a pool of stamina. The example James gives are zombie minions, which have 5 stamina each. If you bundle 5 of those into a squad, they have collectively 25 points of stamina. Say a hero deals 10 damage to any minion of the squad, or they get hit by an area of effect that deals 10 damage. 2 minions will die, not 1. You can describe how your sword cleaves 2 adjacent zombies, how your magic beam causes the ground to shake and a rock to fall on a faraway zombie's head. Standard heroic stuff, you know what I mean. The important part is that every extra multiple of 5 damage kills another zombie. These squinions, just like regular minions from Flea Mortals, allow characters to be heroic, killing hordes of monsters in a single combat. Jordy even proposed the existence of different kinds of minions, such as artillery minions, brute minions, and so on. It's still a tactical game after all. The big twist with squinions, however, is that each squad can have a captain. This is a stronger and more complex non-minion creature which can grant their squad special abilities. Plus, they work by themselves, so you don't necessarily need them to chaperone a bunch of minions into combat. If I understood everything correctly, this framework is a nice balance between Flea Mortals and atomized monsters. You do have complex creatures that can work as captains, but also simpler ones in the minion category. Also, you have to choose who goes when, but this is alleviated by the fact that you choose a whole squad instead of a single creature. And you can have heroes fighting hordes of little creatures, or 1 or 2 stronger enemies. The one thing squinions don't solve is battles losing momentum from the director's side as time goes on. This issue has been thoroughly solved for players with heroic resources. Unlike D20 Fantasy, where characters spend their resources as the battle rages on, in the MCDM RPG, heroes accumulate more heroic resources, which allow them to do more dope stuff, not less. The design team doesn't like the fact that directors were not getting cooler options by the end of combat like the rest of the players. So they're now prototyping Villain Power, aka VP, a director resource that fuels special abilities, terrain features, and other events for the heroes to deal with. James talked about their first draft of how the director accumulates VP, but apparently this was already scrapped, so we'll have to wait and see. And that's it. Simple, right? You have minions and captains, squads, and then villain power to track. That doesn't sound simple at all, actually. And the dev team knows. Matt has said on a Twitch stream, quote, "Our game is more complicated than D20 Fantasy," end quote. Right now, they believe that building and running encounters will be a little more complicated than in D&D. Their counter-argument is that D20 combat is only simple because there's not a lot of structure to it. The DM cannot choose when monsters go, they have very little tactical choice, creatures have boring stat blocks. Do you see my point? The current thinking is that there will be a little bit of a learning curve for directors who aren't used to tactical combat yet. But once they get over this hump, fights will be much more interesting to run than in D&D. The million-dollar question now is, what is the right amount of cognitive load to ask the director to bear? There's not a clear answer to this yet, so it remains to be seen how many people will be willing to engage with this more complex system. Or, in simpler terms, will the MCDM RPG be the game for you? If you are unsure, keep listening. On the other side of the break, I have a playtest report that just might make you want to engage with a more tactical system. Before I end this episode, let me relay to you a recent playtest report from a member of the MCDM Discord called Donald Shepes. He shared his experience testing with Pesto's group on July 1st. And man, this is so freaking cool. Since I haven't been picked for any playtests, reading these reports is what has made me the most excited for what's to come. He even played a College of the Harlequin Masked Shadow, my most anticipated subclass of the whole game. If you like this kind of stuff, I highly recommend joining the Discord. Anyway, enough chit-chat. I've slightly edited his messages so that it works better in audio, but otherwise I'm simply reading you his text. The credit is all his. Let's go. Quote, A goblin tribe raided a village and captured a hostage. They converted the tavern into a stronghold to fend off any rescue teams. We're the rescue team. We're outside the tavern. As a College of Harlequin's shadow, I peek through the window and let the goblins know I'm on your side. I weave an illusion and transform into a perfect copy of one of the goblin bodyguards. We'll call him Gerald. Luckily, their defenses betray them. They can only see parts of my goblin form as I lead the quote-unquote prisoners to the front door. The goblins are dumbfounded by my striking resemblance to Gerald, but they are yet to catch wise. Still, they're on high alert. A few toughs flank the doors, and a dozen minions jump up on the bar, ready for a fight. The door is open, and we see the hostage in the claws of the tribe's leader. We win initiative. The conduit drops his false bonds and smites some other trucker. He warns the goblins to flee, lest they suffer the same. Hesitation is weakness, so I jump the initiative and scream, "I've been tricked!" and scuttle away to hide behind the leader, and more importantly, right behind the hostage. Little did we know, the archers of this tribe are crack sharpshooters. They replace a bucket of blood in the conduit's body with wood and steel. Good thing I'm safe on the winning side. Except Gerald can see through the illusion. He slaps the archer beside him, points her at his twin, and orders her to fire. She hesitates. If the arrow hits me, the jig is up. The illusion will drop, and I'll be in the middle of a green, 4-foot-tall death scrum. But if the Harlequin's shadows are good at anything, they're good at misdirection. The archer blinks, and now I wear the face of her leader. And her leader wears my face, which is currently Gerald's face. She follows orders, shoots Gerald, and blinks again. The arrow's stuck in the chieftain's leg. I continue to cower behind the tied-up human. Then, the Stormwhite Fury enters. He leaps, transforms into a wolf midair, slams down the chieftain, and tears him apart. Then, a bunch of combat happens. We come back to the archer's turn in round 2. The first archer fires. The orc elementalist drops below 0, but orcs are relentless. He hurls lightning for his opportunity attack and slays a goblin. When that happens, he can spend a recovery and crawls back into positive stamina. Then it happens again, and then again. On the third blast of lightning, he rolls a critical, but he's only injured the goblin and remains dying. Job done, the elementalist converts his free action from the crit into a maneuver and heads back into the room and out of line of sight for some well-deserved rest. On my turn, I cut the hostage free. When my dagger touches the rope, the illusion falls. I'm exposed. "Thanks, Ajax," the hostage exclaims. Yikes. A problem for another time. I slap him, yell "flee," and cloak myself in his visage. Now the goblins only have a 50-50 chance to shoot the hostage, which is extra good as a horde of reinforcements descends on the tavern. The rest of the party whoops some ass before we flee out the back window. I didn't attack a single creature, and it was awesome. End quote. Come on, man. If you're not excited for this game, I doubt you even have a heart. It might be too tactical for some. The cognitive load does seem to be on the higher side for the director, but come on, you gotta give it a shot. In this host's humble opinion, D20 Fantasy cannot even hold a candle to this kind of combat. Sorry. In any case, thank you very, very much for the playtest report, Donald Chepis. I'll be patiently waiting for the next one. And that's it for today, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode and the topics I chose this time. Make sure to check out this episode's description for links to Matt and James's Twitch channels, MCDM and Matt's YouTube channels, MCDM's subreddit, Patreon, and Discord, and all of my socials, plus a full transcript of this episode. Before you leave, make sure to rate the podcast in your platform of choice and leave a comment on YouTube if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes. See you all next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.